All right, hello everybody. Welcome again to today's contemplation. Today's we're just going to enter in and be really quiet. And last time I talked about this quote from C.S. Lewis's Surprised by Joy. I've spent my life studying C.S. Lewis, and he was a Christian as a child, and then he left Christianity from around 12 or 13 when he went to boarding school, a second boarding school, till he was 33. So 20 years he had left it and didn't think it was true until he talked to Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien. And so the last video I made, I called it something like, when did you leave Christianity if you left it, and why? And so C.S. Lewis was kind of, I'm going back through this book. I haven't read it in a number of years, but I went to Oxford and restored his house at one time. I worked for the C.S. Lewis Foundation, and we restored his house, and it's called the Kilns, so that people could go there for a study center. But this isn't going to be just an intellectual video. Look, I'm looking for my other book that I'm reading. Let's see if I have it here. I've been carrying it with me everywhere. It's so funny. It's probably in my car then. I bought this giant bag of books. But I've been reading this book that C.S. Lewis said was one of his top 10 books that influenced his life. It's called The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. It was written in 480 AD or 520, around then. That's when Boethius was around. And so that was like 180 years later after Plato. Oh, no. Plato was 300 AD. I mean, BC. I forgot. I was getting my... But anyway, and so he quotes Plato, and anyway, the one book I didn't bring is the one that I've been reading. But I have Surprised by Joy, so it was with that. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay, this is my worn out copy. I have a my fish taco place in there, but like philosophy. It's all, this one is translated by Green. Richard Green. It's a good translation, but, so you can get that for free. So let's get into it. So in Surprised by Joy, C.S. Lewis is saying, if only someone had told him that the pagan teachings were hinting at what Christianity actually fulfilled. And yes, and that Christianity fulfilled that. And so it's not I'm not sitting here. I am a psychologist. I'm at my day job. I share my office with someone else, so she keeps decorating it in ways that are different than my tastes. So we just are. Those are my angels. But anyway, we deal with what is, and accept. And one of the things that's been coming up, we'll go right back to C.S. Lewis, is whenever you complain, you put yourself back in a victim position. And so it's not that you can't address, if it was really offensive to me or whatever, and I didn't want all this stuff here, I could just say, hey, can we minimize this back to how it was, whatever, I can address it. I learned from Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now. He talks about being present in the now as much as you can. And Jesus is actually teaching about that a lot. But unless you practice being in the present moment, you don't always see that Jesus is teaching that. you have to experience being in the now, and then you see it all over the place. You see how Jesus is teaching that. You're not making it up. You know, he says, put your hand to the plow and don't look back. You know, don't be stuck. Keep looking over what's behind you, because then you can't plow in a straight line. You'll keep messing up the line for your seeds to grow in this world, and your soul's transformation that God is doing in you. Like in this book, C.S. Lewis talks about how God is making you all into little Christs, and that there's this awkward phase, you know, where I have, let's see if I have it. No, I don't. I have, it's awesome. I have this horse, so that's cool. But I have at my house this drawing by Charlie Mackesy of this flying horse. All right. And so, but right now I have one of his paintings he gave me. We'll look at it for a second. He went to boarding school when he was a child. I was friends with this artist, Charlie Mackesy, so I'm not, like, this is his, so don't take his art, but there's this angel over this little kid on a piano, right? And so C.S. Lewis is talking about God. It's not, Christianity is not about, you know, God is teaching like a regular horse, see this horse right here, to jump higher. He's like, it's more like changing a regular horse into a flying horse. But at first, when people look at you, they're not going to understand what's going on. And it might be like, you have these awkward wings and you feel like so awkward, like a teenager. You know how we felt sometimes at teenage. And so it's like your wings are developing, but people just see you and you look like this. I was talking to this Jewish lawyer that I've hired that is very knowledgeable about all of these mystic things. But what was he talking about today? We were talking about King David for a moment, because King David was a real historical figure. Jesus is in the lineage of him. But he was saying, I was talking to him about how Saul continued to persecute David, and he had to keep running from him, even though he was anointed to be the king. He had to keep going into the wilderness and he reminded me, I forgot. He went into the Philistine camp and he pretended to be mad, to be crazy, in order that they wouldn't destroy him. And so it's like, all of these things, if you understand all of these things in the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, or there's the Psalms and the wisdom teaching, the Proverbs and the prophets. So all of these people, if you think that the divine love, the creator, was speaking through this group of people so that we could understand the patterns of God, the real God, how God operates. So it's like all of these people were real, but they're also patterns and types. Just like, you know, Star Wars, let's say, is not real. It's a fictional story. But Lucas used Joseph Campbell's formula because that story wasn't going well. And then he met with Joseph Campbell's people and infused the hero's journey. And I did a video a couple videos ago where I have this plastic sheet that I laminated for us that takes us through the hero's journey. I don't know what video that is, but I think I was sitting on the floor by my bed, so it's white in the background. And it was like 3 videos ago. And I might have tagged it Hero's Journey. I don't know. It might be in the description. But anyway, where the hero is called. We're called. Each of us are called. It says in Psalm 139, a psalm that David wrote, right? Because he was anointed with the Holy Spirit. He said, you knit me together in my mother's womb. Behold the plans you have for me. And there's like a book that is written for each of us. And you know every single one of the pages. The Creator knows. I love it. I don't know how many pauses to make in this because I love it in Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis talks about the nature of time. And this blew my mind and really helped me understand how God can be like this, and of course send his holy angels, but also just love you intimately, is I got this for the wings. Like, God is making these majestic wings in us. Noetically, if you want to understand spiritually and noetically, we're being changed, we're being transformed into transformed, that's movement, formed into something else, conformed, formed with, like con queso is with cheese. We're formed with Christ into something new if you choose to walk the path of Christ and receive Christ, receive God's a willingness to transform you. So let me go back to the sense of time. But one thing I was going to say is the Jewish people, they have this saying, this understanding that when you accept a righteous person into your house, their righteousness is conferred over onto you. And so if you think of what does it mean mystically and psychologically and spiritually, you know, it's very deep depth, and so words are limiting. But when you accept the righteousness that Christ was perfect, if you accept his righteousness, he takes your transgressions upon himself and puts them on the cross and gives you his robe of righteousness, because you're welcoming into the heart, the house of your heart. And so his righteousness is conferred unto you. There's a saying in the Torah that says that. It says, you know, something about when you welcome a righteous man. There's a verse about it for sure. They don't, I share my office out there with lots of other people, and well, not lots, just 7 or so, but anyway. So the nature of time, so that you can understand this. So let's say I was reading one of the Narnia books. I was listening to one this morning. I'm so glad I have a copy here. I used to have like teenage clients sometimes, and so, or if they were in the waiting room, I'd let them borrow my Narnia books. So let me grab one because I hope you're doing well. Welcome to this channel. We go really deep because I don't want you to be left without, when Jesus says, wide is the road to hell and narrow is the gate to heaven and very few find it. What does he mean? You know, I want you to be equipped, and you're already equipped, because John 1:9 says that Christ is the light which lighteth all people who come to this earth. I say like soul-bearing people. So let's go back to time. And C.S. Lewis talks about it a lot in the Narnia books. So I'm reading Prince Caspian right now. I'm listening to the unabridged audible of it, right? I can show the cover. And so I have a light, so that's lit up more. But the kids come back to Narnia, and it's like 1,000 years later, and it's only been a year or something for them since they've been back to Narnia. And so I just got this to show you. Okay, so let's say if you are an author of a book and you're saying, fourth point, don't you remember it was the very day before the ambassadors came from the king of Calormen? Don't you remember planting the orchard outside the north gate of Caraparavel? The greatest of all the wood people, Pomona herself, came to put good spells on it. It was those very decent little chaps, the moles, who did the actual digging. Can you have forgotten that funny, and they go on. And he says, right, the chief mole leaning on his spade and saying, believe me, your majesty, you'll be glad of these fruit trees one day. And by Jove, he was right. It ends up that they come back all these years later, and the trees are so full grown, and they didn't have any food, but the apple trees were there, and they didn't even know they were at Caraparavel. But anyway, if you are writing this, okay, let's say you're writing this, and you put your pen down, right? The next line is Lucy saying, I do, said Lucy, and clapped her hands. But look here, Peter, said Edmund, this must be all rot. To begin with, we didn't plant the orchard slap up against the gate. we wouldn't have been such fools, right? And so if you put your pen down and you haven't written any of the rest yet, you can sit for 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 years and contemplate what's going to be next. And in the story, after you write it, after 2 years or 2 weeks or 2 hours, the story keeps flowing and no time has passed. And so it's hard for our minds. Our minds aren't going to get this, but you can start getting some of this, that God is the I am that I am before all creation. All creation is out of God. It says, in him we live and move and have our being. So some people describe it like we are in God's dream. And these are just words, okay? So don't get caught up in any of the words. If it doesn't resonate with you or doesn't make sense or you don't get a knowing about it, then let it go. But it was helpful to me because in Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis is talking about this is how God can answer your intimate prayers, because he can just stop time as we understand it and think about, what ought I do next? How can I, fulfill this prayer request, or teach Cheryl or you, or whomever you are, transform them to get to the place where they can receive the good that I want to give them. And so there's the guy that I taught about. I did a whole series like 5 years ago or more called The New Man by Dr. Maurice Nicole. And not everyone is going to understand that or want to listen to it or whatever, but I think it was one of his sayings. He was saying it's kind of like, and C.S. Lewis touches upon it in Mere Christianity. He says that we don't know what would have happened if Adam and Eve hadn't fallen, if they hadn't taken a lesser path, hadn't been seduced and deceived into the dark side, pretty much, right? To turn from God and try to be their own kind of gods. But he says, perhaps God would have given us the very Zoe life. In John 10:10, so I took ancient Greek in undergrad. Jesus says, the thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly. And the word for life there is this word Zoe. All right. And so it's different than bios life. So C.S. Lewis explains that, like, and there's verses that talk about this. So you can look up the verses in the New Testament that say, be not conformed into this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's your nous, that's your perception, the capacity to perceive spiritual things. God is renewing that to something higher. Now, I don't know, some people that I love and care about who study these things talk about certain things that people got injected into their bodies that are messing up with people's pineal gland or other parts of your brain with spike proteins. And I don't know. I just am like, I was just praying the other day. I was like, well, God, just heal all of that. So people, because they're thinking that some of those things, people's personalities are changing. And it's like, if God made your biological body able to receive and perceive the things of God, and then there's biological, let's put it like that were messing with your ability to activate these parts of your brain that receive that. But the people that bring that up to me, I don't know if they know that. So you have an etheric counterpart to your physical body. You have a spiritual counterpart. So that just means, and you don't have to believe me, you can go research this yourself, but I don't recommend going into the occult stuff at all. I learned this from a Christian healer and mystic who was Orthodox. So he was never kicked out of the Orthodox Church. And many Orthodox priests knew him and went to study with him. But anyway, and so let's say, and I learned it also from a Christian medicine man named Red Elk. And so, but anyway, I mean, he was so dedicated to Christ. He called Jesus his big brother, right? And he's like, always follow Jesus, like, and not some, Christ consciousness type of thing, even though Christ will give you his consciousness. Like, there's something real about that. But everything that is perverted or twisted, I was just listening to Mere Christianity again when I was walking on the beach earlier this week. That's what brought about this video for us. And he was saying, Lewis was saying, notice how everything evil borrows from the good. Even when people, like, let's say they want to get more money or something, there's nothing wrong that you want an abundance of stuff, right? If you make it an idol, if you put it before God, then it becomes poisonous for you. It becomes distorted. But, for, like, you want your baby. I was just talking with this pregnant woman. It's like, you want your baby to be able to nurse and have milk, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But if you went and, forced another mom to give your baby milk in a wrong way, you're taking something that was good, that is good, but you're taking it in a wrong way, because we're not meant to force people to do something. And I don't know how you're using the coercion or whatever, but it's just like, you see how, or someone that, has a desire to, let's say a man has a desire to be with a woman, but he goes and takes that in the wrong way, in a way that's just using that person, and there's no commitment, and there's nothing, and people will go online and do stuff like that, sadly, and it's objectifying women, and it's teaching women that they can get rewarded with lots of money to objectify themselves. And so it's like, there's a good thing that a husband and a wife can come together and make babies and love each other and develop intimacy and commitment and this long-term, like, leaning on each other and developing. It's just like, I have 2 kids, and the relationship of friendship, and that they've seen me be a consistent mom over year after year after year, not perfect by any means, but it builds this trust, and it's just this relationship you can't name, that's not like any other. And I have friendships that are, I've known them longer than I've known my children. And so those friendships too, there's something so deep and satisfying about real friendships. And the way you learn how to relate with yourself, right? If you are always, and one of my friends, I was on a walk with her the other day, and she was talking about a trauma brain. She's another therapist, like, I'm a psychologist, but anyway, she's saying when you have trauma in childhood, it's just, she said it a different way that resonated, even though I went to school for 9 years to study psychology, and I've been doing this for over 20, but that sometimes when you experience a trauma, it's like there's not conversation as much between the logical part of your brain, your left brain, and your more artistic brain. that's sort of shut down. There's not this conversation going back and forth because you get stuck in a trauma loop. And so you keep responding to things in a trauma way, like out of fear, I've done so many videos. You can look up my videos on YouTube with my name, Dr. Cheryl Meyer. And like, that's one of the books I've written. So my name's on that. My dad co-wrote like one of the chapters. And so, but anyway, on the 5 primal brain responses. I added 2, but other people have talked about 4 of them, but it's fight, flight, or freeze is the first 3. And then there's fret. That's like just staying in this worry. Jesus says, why are you worrying? You know, God knows you need these things. Ask God and trust that he's going to bring them to you, your food and your clothing, and stop worrying about these things, running after them. And so, oh, that's so funny. I didn't know that. Hold on. Okay. So, and then, so fretting is worrying, and fawn is the 5th one. When you start trying to please other people because you think you need their approval. That's a repetition of childhood. That's stuck in this childhood thing of, I have to please my parents or else my whole world's going to crumble. And so people will go and transfer that onto their job or onto their spouse or onto the person they're dating or onto some strangers and think I have to keep, or society, you know, through all your social media, I have to keep pleasing these people to make them think that I'm cool so that I don't lose all my friendships. Because if you're a child and you see your parent and they keep crushing you, you learn to try to please them so that, you know, the situation will change. So anyway, so you can read about that, but all right, let me set this down. Is so when C.S. Lewis, that quote I did last time about why did you leave Christianity and when did you come back, if you came back. So C.S. Lewis was saying, if only someone had told me, let's see, wow. Anyway, there's all sorts of stuff here. Okay, so here's the quote that I quoted, page 62 of this version of Surprised by Joy. It says, no one ever attempted to show in what sense Christianity fulfilled paganism or paganism prefigured Christianity. And then I read more of that quote, but I won't today because when I was on my walk, after I walked with my friend, she left and I walked more, been walking a lot lately, is I was listening to this part of Mere Christianity, which the chapter's called, there's the rival concepts of God and then the invasion of the good, right? God, we are like, he says Christianity, I love this quote, I don't have it right here, but it says, Christianity is the only religion that says we come from a good creator and this world has gone bad, but we still retain a memory of the good. Because otherwise, he said, if we didn't retain this memory, how could we say it's not fair that it's gone bad? Because how do you know that it's gone bad unless we came from something good? If it's just accidental and it just happened, then why are you complaining? Why do you complain that, you know, if there's a good God, why is there evil in this world? Well, how can you have love without free will? And if you offer soul-bearing people, free will, and they choose to go bad with it, and the bad and the evil and the distorted, and you know, and you see also people will choose love and choose the highest good. And it's not about being moralistic and like, oh, look how good I am. It's about knowing who you are. Okay, so before I go into this quote, I forgot, I want to tie up that loose end about Maurice Nicole that I talked about. And I'm so glad, thank you, God, that got brought back up. He said, you know, I think it was Maurice Nicole or C.S. Lewis, but that it's like if you see an acorn. I used to have nuts in here for snacks, but I think they went rancid, so I threw them away. But if you have an acorn right here and you just dress it up and draw on it. We used to draw on pecans when I was a little kid in elementary school in Texas, because that's just, we would find, there's this giant pecan tree. I just showed it to my son when we were out in Dallas for a wedding. I showed him my elementary school, and the pecan tree was still there, and there were pecan shells. And I was like, we used to take our pencils and draw little creatures, you know, whatever. But anyway, so let's just say if you dress up this acorn and you're like, look at how dressed up, look, I can put this in a pretend Ferrari, let's say this, you know, and just drive it around. This is like your personality self, your egotism, this self that you have to spend all this time propping up. If you are identified with it, if you're identified with your trauma, if you're identified with your past, if you're identified with this personality self, if I go, oh, look, I wrote that book and I am an author and therefore I'm important. Well, how long are you going to feel important after you wrote that? I wrote that over 20 years ago now, right? I've written the new book more recently. I'll show you, just not because I'm trying to prove anything, but because I'm doing the Audible for it now, and it's so nice to go back to finally. I was in a lawsuit for a long time, and so it's like I published this months and months ago, and I haven't got to doing the Audible for it yet, and I wanted to do it a long time ago and tell people about this book. But it's 12 Ways to Heal from Trauma, spiritual and psychological. It's 444 pages. It's on Amazon. But anyway, you know, and so I started the Audible. It's so wonderful to remind myself of these truths that came through me. They're like life-giving. They really are. And you can just watch the video for free, so I don't need your money or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you want this, it's very in-depth, and but it's not cumbersome, you know. And I put links, and I put all of Jesus's words in red. Even if you don't know Jesus, he's a very approachable Jesus in this book, because he wants to free you and bring you to the highest level of consciousness and transform you. Like what C.S. Lewis is saying is, if Adam and Eve hadn't have fallen, then God might have given us the Zoe life at that time and raised us back up to the spiritual beings we were meant to be. So this is what I'm talking about, the acorn. Jesus said, unless the seed goes into the ground, and you know when a seed goes into the ground, you can watch the progression of this on YouTube or somewhere, the outer shell comes off and the plant starts growing, and it grows into this giant acorn tree. It's not meant to stay as an acorn nut, as a seed. It's meant to go into the ground. Well, that's a picture of what we're meant to be, is something else. Like when I've shown sometimes, you know, when you see a priest doing this or Jesus making the symbol, I was taught by an Orthodox monk that you have a divine nature and a human nature, and this is the Trinity, God the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And so they're blessing you, and so you receive a blessing. That's what, and so it's kind of like waking up this memory that you have, that you're meant to be something so much more. And people will try to be like this horse, right? This is from my office mate, so we can thank her for this, right? It's beautiful, you know. But it's like, imagine if you spent your whole life trying to jump higher and higher. Whoops, the tail is taped on. Don't want to mess with that. And so you're trying to jump higher and higher when God really always meant for you to have wings, you know. That's this Zoe life. I came to give you life, Zoe, and life abundantly. You can look up in the New Testament. I have one here. You can look up online. Here's the Greek, right? Just all of the times the word Zoe is used. It says occurrences on, there's a site called blueletterbible.org or something that will show you. So that's John 10:10 if you want to look it up and start there, and then just push the Strong's number and it will show you, and you'll learn a lot about it. And so I've just been contemplating, and I wanted to give this to us today, is, you know, how much time have we been spending trying to dress up this acorn instead of going through the dark night of the soul? It's called The Dark Night of the Soul. St. John of the Cross wrote a book called The Ascent of Mount Carmel, where he talks about this in the, I think the 1400s, perhaps, around then. Same time as St. Teresa of Avila, she wrote a book called The Interior Castle. They knew each other. It can be really painful. Like, I was crying earlier today, and I reached out to one of my friends to pray for me because she's been through it herself. But you can think about it in your mind. You can say, what am I actually losing? It feels like C.S. Lewis talks about in here in Mere Christianity, he says, imagine if you were like a 10 soldier, like one of those things you play with made out of 10 back in the days when he was little, and you're turning into a real boy or a real girl, and you're like, no, I just want to stay this 10 soldier. Or he says, when you were first in the womb of your mother, you looked like a tadpole at first, and then you have a heartbeat after 10 days, I think. I think it's after 10 days or after 2 weeks or so, you start having a heartbeat and all of the, but he's like, but imagine if you were like, no, I don't ever want to leave my mother's womb. I just want to stay in there. It's like, you're meant to come out and be born into something else, right? You develop in there, and you develop into this human being. You always have the code in you to become that. And so imagine, just like the acorn seed has the DNA code in it to let go, and this plant grows up, and then it grows into this giant tree that produces all of these acorn seeds, right? And John 15, that's what I have my Bible open here. Jesus said, I'm going to read it for us, all right? So just be present for a second. Don't be turned off by this. It says, ego eimi, that means I am in Greek. Ego eimi, I am. When Jesus ever says the I am, especially when you look in the book of John, he did 7 big I ams. I am the good shepherd. I am the living water. I am the light of the world. But he said, you are the light of the world as well. What does that mean? All right. But anyway, so this is in NIV, and I don't necessarily prescribe to this translation, so just bear with. Some people, anyway, I won't say what some people say. Anyway, because some translations of the Greek, they miss out on very key, deep concepts, and so they leave people sometimes with some theology missing, but no one's perfect. So I am the true vine. That's translated. Look, if you see it here in Greek, ego eimi, the vine aletheia. That's true, right? So Jesus is talking, I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he trims clean so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. So there's something in that, some deep mystery, but remain in me. What was I reading it? It says, abide in me. I think it's the word, let's see, for remain is well, this is a different declension, but it's manate, but it's to remain, to abide, to live, to dwell in this place. What does it mean to dwell in Christ? Remain in me, right? Make your home in me. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain, abide, mene, remain in me. So imagine, like we're talking about these trees, if you took off this branch, right? Or we have this live plant that my office mate has in here, right? I think these are real. This might be a fake one. She had a real one in here for the longest time. I don't know, they're tied on. I can't tell. But anyway, if this was real, I can't tell. I can't tell. Weird. It's weird that I can't tell. But anyway, if this was real or is real, if you cut this off right here, it's not going to keep blooming new blooms over time because it's cut off from its source, right? The roots where the whole plant system grows. Anyway, there's something to that you can't tell if it's real or not. I'm getting something, but I can't go on every tangent that shows up, right? So remain in me and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. These branches, if you cut them off from this, they can't keep bearing the flowers, okay? And so what does it mean to remain in God? What does it mean? Like what I was saying a little bit earlier is that, I was thinking after I let myself have a big old cry, I was sitting in my car and I was like, what have I lost? What could I possibly lose if I'm just losing this outer shell and becoming what I was always meant to be? I don't know what that plant is. That's different than keep dressing up this acorn. But it's worth it to become it. But just like what C.S. Lewis was talking about in here, he's saying, what if the 10 soldiers, like, no, I want to stay this 10. I don't want to be like the story Pinocchio, where he becomes, instead of a wooden puppet that doesn't have strings, he becomes a real boy. If you think, I don't want to become that, because you don't know what a real boy or a real girl is, you don't know what this divine nature is. You're just stuck in these human eyes, and you have a knowing. I'll talk to you about the knowing, because that comes from what I wrote down in my journal here. I don't mind showing it to you. Something from Boethius. Hold on. I'm just making sure it doesn't have anything personal, because it's my journal for right now for this month. So Boethius wrote this right here, and I'll read it in a second. Page 69 in that book. So that book is copyrighted, but this is just a brief quote from it. So I think we can quote it for teaching purposes, because we're adding to it. If you add to it, then it's, school copyright domain, like, it's for educational purposes. But just like we're quoting from this NIV in the Greek, John chapter 15. All right. Remain in me, abide in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. And we got those two images, right? And we have all these plants. I start singing like, welcome to the jungle, sometimes when I come in here, because I'm like, there's always like a new giant plant, but that's okay. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man, anthropos, a man or a woman, right, remains in me, that's Greek, and I in him or her, he or she will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. What can you do? If God is love and we remain connected to divine love and we keep bearing fruit of love, the fruits of the Spirit are listed in the book called Galatians that Paul wrote to the Galatians, the people in Galatia, a town back then. And it says the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, this real joy of being, peace, this peace that's beyond the peace that anything in the world can give you. I got a peace after I finally birthed this book, but then I don't have this peace because it's been all these months and I haven't promoted it yet because I was in this court case and you know, second guess sometimes, was I meant to be or not? I learned a lot through it, but it's like, you can't get your peace in external things. It says that in the beginning of the book because I just read the prologue for us. Meister Eckhart, I'll quote that because I don't mind quoting from my own book. He says, so Meister Eckhart was a Christian mystic that lived in Cologne for a long time. One of my sons just was in Cologne, Germany, with his father. Okay, so the 1300s he lived there. He says, for whoever does not truly have God within themselves, but must constantly receive him in one external thing after another, seeking God in diverse ways, whether by particular works, people, or places, such a person does not possess God. The least thing can impede them, for they do not have God and do not seek, love, and intend him alone. It's not only bad company, but also good company that can obstruct them. Not only the street, but also the church. Not only evil words and deeds, but also good words and deeds. For the obstruction lies within themselves, since in them God has not become all things. All right. And so I said the next sentence. Now understand, Meister Eckhart was in charge at one time of 47 convents. I read this in a woman who studied this in her post, but so he's certainly not opposed to people going to church and being involved with church people. But, you know, if you use a church to build up this spiritual identity and go volunteer for all this stuff, to dress up this acorn so you feel like an important acorn, and you don't let God bury the seed of yourself in the ground and let the real plant of who you were always meant to be to grow, then what are you doing? You're delaying this transformation and using the church to do so. And so it's this transformation that God wants to take you into, to wake up and develop this divine nature in yourself. Look, I just looked down. Imagine, right? Look, I didn't know, I forgot. This is on the side of my books, right? It's from The Magician's Nephew. It's a flying horse. Okay, now C.S. Lewis is the one that talks about, you know, that God wants to make you into something different. From that horse to that horse, right? It's like that. That's just a picture, a word picture he uses. But all right, let's finish this passage in John chapter 15. Because I wanted to give you all an hour of my time today. And so we're almost coming to the end of that. I hope this is... you'll see, I'm like going to say this quote from Boethius, wakes up in you. This knowing, this remembrance. You have this remembrance of what I'm saying. So it's not just words. So I pray that this goes to exactly who it's meant to go to. God, please direct this video to whom it's meant to go to. Please open their spiritual eyes. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man or a woman remains in me and I in her or him, he or she will bear much fruit. Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, and temperance. Temperance is to delay the immediate gratification for the greater good that's more remote. Well, it might be immediately gratifying to try to act like a church person or act like a worldly person, be like, I've got all this money, I've got all these cars, whatever, you know, That's going for the immediate satisfaction. That is not temperance. Temperance is one of the three cardinal virtues as well. I think it is. There's 4 theological virtues and 3 cardinal virtues. You can look it up on my YouTube channel. I did a whole video on it, but temperance is to delay the immediate gratification. When I go, oh, you know what? It might make me feel better in this moment to dress up this acorn so that everyone thinks I'm cool. Because they're walking around acting like all we have to do is dress up these acorns, this personality self of yourself. It would be a lot more clear if we were all walking around like acorns, but it's more like we're walking around in these avatars, like video game avatars, and you get so caught up in the game that you think you're the avatar. You think you're this Barbie personality self that you've developed. In order to navigate through this life, we kind of have to develop some part of our egotism. But then what Maurice Nicole says, it's so awesome. He says, it's kind of like, you know, if your essence is the yolk of an egg and you've developed this personality, once you recognize who the real you is and you understand your real self, then you're meant to eat up the personality like a chick in an egg. It says it eats the white of the egg and it becomes this yellow chick. I don't know if that's true. I haven't looked that up, but he's talking about that's how it survives in the shell to become the baby chick instead of just an egg, right? And so it's like you're meant to be something else. Aw, look at what I have on my cup. Right when I said you're meant to be something else, God gave me this cup in the weirdest, strangest, awesome way. Look at it, it looks like a halo around it, but he says, be mine. This is what you get to be always. Jesus says, okay, and I'll finish this passage so we get it all in one go. If a man or woman remains in me and I in him, he or she will bear much fruit. And I talk to you about the fruits of the Spirit that are in Galatians. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Because what are you doing? Like, what are you really accomplishing as this acorn? You're teaching other people to just stay as acorns and build up their acorn. Like, what are we actually doing when we're doing that? We're actually probably deceiving people unless they see how painful our lives have become from trying to stay as an acorn when we're meant to be a flying horse, right? Something else. The big acorn tree, the new man. More than what Maurice Nicole describes in that book that I read for us years ago. If anyone does not remain in me, he or she is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. The way the Buddha described the word, what enlightenment is, he says it's the end of suffering. So that you're not running after this goal of trying to end your suffering, or trying to do something else. But I was reflecting today, because all truth is God's truth. So if any part of what the Buddha was saying was true, then it's hinting at, he said, there's these Buddhist writings that I've read about that said the Christ is coming, because he was around, if Plato was 300 BC, I think the Buddha was 500 or 400, around then, I can't remember, but he was saying the Christ will be coming, and he said in this many years, look to him. The word Buddha means awakened. He is the God-man that will teach you these things. I have it in one of my videos too. I ought to hashtag that Buddha so we can find it. That would be funny to hashtag that, but I ought to so we can find a way to find it, because it's hard to find. I have over 2,000 videos now, but don't be discouraged. I think I did a post about it once too, so you can just look at my posts. I don't have hardly any posts. Look, about 3 years ago maybe. I probably do like 3 a year, maybe more lately. I did 2 today, but anyway, I was looking at that. A branch, if you break off these branches and you're looking like what Meister Eckhart was saying, outside of yourself to try to get the good, and you're not staying connected, then it's like you experience all this suffering because you're identified with something that's not you, that's not going to actually fulfill you. But anyway, you get to find that out. And so such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. You know, you experience the burning of suffering, like all my videos about being ghosted, because I was looking externally for someone else to reaffirm my worth that I already had. You know, you already are a real boy, a real girl. Christ already left heaven to pursue you, to die for you, to redeem you, to bring you back to a perfect, righteous God, to give you his perfection. Like, he laid down his life for you. No other person can give you more worth than that. He loved us before we turned back to him, not just for the people that would turn back for him. He died for every single person. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, John 3:16, that whichsoever out of all these people will choose to believe in him will not perish, but have this everlasting Zoe. You have this everlasting Zoe life, everlasting life wake up in you. This woman had this near-death experience, and my friend was, I don't always look at those because sometimes maybe people can be deceived, but I like this guy named Kevin Zadai, what he describes, his interaction with Jesus seems so, you always correspond it to the Bible, see, but God showed her when she had died and went to heaven, and then she came back, all these sparks, and she's like, what are these? Because some were going up and some didn't have the lightness of being to fly up. He's like, these are all souls that have chosen God, that have chosen to be redeemed by Christ, or however you say it, right? These other ones are too heavy and they didn't choose me. And she just felt this grief of God to lose these people that they don't have to be lost. And so that's just another picture of this life, this life that you're meant to have. But if you're insisting on being this acorn, you don't let go of this outer shell because it feels painful. Jesus was showing it to me today, because a couple days ago we read in our morning and evening prayers, we read through the whole Bible, and they were reading the passage about Jesus saying, look at this woman. You know, there were real people going into the temple, putting all these bags of money or whatever into the temple treasury, and this woman put like 2 pennies in, right? And sometimes when I was reading the commentary, that is like your physical life and your spiritual life, or your divine and human. Blessed Theophylact talks about this, if I remember correctly, from the 1100s he wrote. But anyway, Jesus said she gave more than everybody else. They're giving out of their abundance, out of these extra bags they have as these acorn. She gave out of the only thing she had to live on. She put it in. And we don't know why she put it in that day, but she did. And in doing so, she trusted that God would provide for her everything she needed, or else she would die. And so when Jesus says, in order to follow me, you must take up your cross every day and follow me, that means be willing to face a cross. He gave us himself on the cross and resurrected from that. So he shows what can be done as resurrection can happen. New life can be born. Eternal life can now be given to everyone. There's this verse that says, "Wear out death is your sting." I have that in the prologue of my book because I was just reading it yesterday. Anyway, I'll keep going. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given unto you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved you, this is what I meditated on today. As the Father has loved you, so have I loved you. As the Father has loved me, Jesus is saying that just as the Father God, the Creator, has loved Christ, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. The Sufi poet Rumi says, wherever you go, whatever you do, remain in love. All right, so Jesus is saying this right here. As the Father has, it's the word agape love. So it's a deeper kind of love, not transactional love. Look, I'll show you it. It's after this beginning part. It's right here. Agape. It's the, this is the, anyway. Agape sin. It's how you, it's how, if you were to be like, my family is taking something to someone else. The word take turns into taking. It's like that in Greek here. So as the Father has given me this agape love, as the Father has done that, because God is love, and 1 John 4, 7 and 8 talks about that. So have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. Well, like if everyone understood what, look at the word commandments in Greek. It's the word entole. Let's see, that's remain. Commandments right here. Entole. In my telos. It's if you remain in this path, in this way of understanding, if you remain in the telos, I was meditating a long time ago on the word righteousness, and God was showing me this right wayness. Christ walked in the telos of God. Telos is like a telescope, or the end goal. Like you can study this thing called teleology, but like, let's say you have a bicycle. You're not meant to hold the bicycle over your head and walk around with it. A bicycle's end goal is like the way a bike is created is meant to be ridden so you can go places faster on this bicycle, not carried around on your back. That's not the telos of a bike. You know, if we have a meal, it's meant to be enjoyed and nourish your body. If we have a man and a woman and they can come together on this earth and make babies and make a family and create a loving, supportive environment, that's just so beautiful. And it's a replication of the love that God has for us. Then it's like that. It's like that's more of the telos. So Jesus is saying, walk, remain in this telos, this direction that I've shown you, this understanding of this new creation that you're meant to be. Remain in that, and you will abide in my love, just as I have remained. He says, I don't do my will, I do the will of my Father. His telos, this, you know, anyway. So let me go back, and then I'll wrap this up. And so here's from Boethius, from this book, The Consolation of Philosophy, which C.S. Lewis said that this book is in this top 10 books that influenced his life, right? It says on page 69, it says, the man or woman, right? We're talking about back in those days, they would use the word man for human to mean both. Eve came out of Adam, the side of Adam. And so man is meant to encompass both man and woman, but that's a long story. But the man who searches deeply for the truth and wishes to avoid being deceived by false leads must turn the light of his inner vision upon himself. He must guide his soaring thoughts back again and teach his spirit that it possesses, hidden among its own treasures, whatever it seeks outside of itself, like I was talking about in John 1:9. You can read it yourself. It just says, Christ, he's talking about Christ, is the light which lighteth all people that come into this world. And so if you're made in the image and likeness of God, God put this truth in you. He'll explain it. Because Boethius was a Christian, but he doesn't bring up Christ in any part of this, but he directs you in this indirect way. It's so amazing. Anyway, he says, then all that was hidden by the dark cloud of error will shine more clearly than Phoebus, which is like this, a word for the sun. For the body, with its burden of forgetfulness, cannot drive all light from his mind. The seed of truth grows deep within, and is raised to life by the breath of learning. For how can you answer questions truly unless the spark of truth glows deep in your heart? If Plato's muse speaks truly, whatever is learned is a recollection of something forgotten. So that's in Plato's Phaedo 72 through 76. He's quoting Plato. And I talk about it a lot because another translation of that passage in Boethius is everything you learn is just remembering. It's just remembering. So you have a knowing of these things that I'm just reminding you of. And so the last part I was going to read was this quote from Mere Christianity, because it's like the answer to my last teaching video. I did a couple live videos where my friends, they were just live last night at this golf course that I went to last minute, because all songs remind me of the love of God. And so there's these 80s songs that they sing. And anyway, so in the last book, the last video I made, the long video it was like 45 minutes. I said, why did you leave Christianity, or what made you leave? I went out to a lot of people compared to some of my other videos, but anyway. So, and Lewis was saying, if only someone had taught me when I was 14 that part of the paganistic stuff was glimpsing that we were all made to worship God, and that Christianity fulfills what they were looking for, instead of being caught in like a trauma loop, or caught as the acorn and be deceived, or caught. It's just like if you had, I used to play this game called World of Warcraft. My ex-husband helped develop that game. So we played the beta, we played it a lot. We played, and so I knew how to make all this money in that game. And if they call them WoW widows, unfortunately. It's like, and any game can be taken to extreme, but it's like, if these men are too afraid, or women, to face this world and live in it, because in this fantasy world that you've created, your character, I had all of these blue items, they were called blue items, all over in these different banks, and you could have so much money that you learned how to make in that world. But if you hadn't learned how to make that in the quote real world, you could just spend 12 hours a day playing in WoW. And eventually some people sold stuff in that game to make money, and they weren't meant to, because it messes up the economy in that game and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, it's kind of like that. If you get so caught up in it that you think you are that character, and it's like, no, you're the person playing that character. You're not that character. You are, God is meaning to develop this other you, this divine self. And if we don't go on to that, then what is, what's the soul that's being saved? What is salvation? What is that? You can explore that. But okay, and so here, C.S. Lewis answers the last video right here in Mere Christianity. So I was just walking on the beach, and I happened to have this part of my Audible on, and I was like, this just answers my last video. He says, that's the key to history. Terrific energy is expended. Civilizations are built up, excellent institutions devised, but each time something goes wrong, some fatal flaw always brings the selfish and cruel people to the top, and it all slides back into misery and ruin. In fact, the machine conks. It seems to start up all right and runs a few yards, and then it breaks down. They are trying to run it on the wrong juice. That is what Satan has done to us humans. And what did God do? First of all, what did God do about this, right? He left us conscience, the sense of right and wrong. And all through history, there have been people trying, some of them very hard, to obey it, to obey their conscience. None of them ever quite succeeded. besides Jesus, right? Secondly, he sent the human race what I call good dreams. I mean those queer stories scattered all through the heathen religions about a God who dies and comes to life again, and by his death has somehow given new life to men, right? This is page 50 of this book. Thirdly, he selected one particular people and spent several centuries hammering into their heads the sort of God he was. And there was only one of him, and that he cared about right conduct. He does care about that. It helps you waken up to these real truths. This is what I'm adding, but those people were the Jews, and the Old Testament gives an account of the hammering process. Then comes the real shock. Among these Jews, there suddenly turns up a man who goes about talking as if he was God. He claims to forgive sins. He says he has always existed. He says he is coming to judge the world at the end of time. This is Jesus, right? Now, let us get this clear. Among pantheists, like the Indians, I think from India he's talking about, anyone might say that he was a part of God or one with God. There would be nothing very odd about it. But this man, since he was a Jew, could not mean that kind of God. God, in their language, meant the being outside the world, the I am that I am, right? Who had made it and was infinitely different from anything else. And when you have grasped that, you will see that what this man said was quite simply the most shocking thing that has ever been uttered by human lips. One part of the claim tends to slip past us unnoticed because we have heard it so often that we no longer see what it amounts to. I mean the claim to forgive sins, any sins. Now, unless the speaker is God, this is really so preposterous as to be comic. We can all understand how a man forgives offenses against himself, right, by another person. You tread on my toes and I forgive you. You steal my money and I forgive you. But what should we make of a man himself, unrobbed and untrodden on, who announced that he forgave you for treading on other men's toes, and stealing other men's money? Asinine fatuity is the kindest description we should give of his conduct. Yet this is what Jesus did. He told people that their sins were forgiven and never waited to consult all the other people whom their sins had undoubtedly injured. He unhesitatingly behaved as if he was the party chiefly concerned, the person chiefly offended in all offenses. This makes sense only if he really was the God whose laws are broken and whose love is wounded in every sin. The word sin in Greek is hamartia. It means to miss the mark of perfect love. And so God, you go against this way, this telos of God, this way you were created to operate. When you go against love, when you do ghost someone, or when you, I think too, try to get your worth from someone who ghosted you, right? There's a sin in both. You miss the mark of perfect love when you don't learn from that error and go, wait a second, that person knows nothing about my worth. God does, and God gives me it from the beginning, and he shows me it every moment of every day. Anyway, and so he goes on to say, like, if Christ were as meek, like people, like he says, I am meek, you know, and people, when they read the Bible, they don't think he's all full of himself. If he was really just this enlightened teacher, he wouldn't have said, I forgive sins, and I am. You know, the people, when they tried to arrest him, they fell back when he says, I am, right? You can read about that. And so it's like Lewis goes into, and I think Josh McDowell goes and writes Evidence of Man's a Verdict book based on Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis says he's either Lord, as he says he is, he's God, right? And he can forgive sins, or he's a lunatic, or he's lying, right? And he says that in different ways, but another author draws that out from this book, Mere Christianity. I don't know what I'm going to name this video, but I'm glad you clicked on it. I'm glad you're here, and I wish you love. And I hope that you learn how to be deeply present and ask God, who am I? Who am I? What is my real self? Who am I? How can I yield myself and be like the widow? The widow. Blessed Theophylact says in the commentary of the Gospels from the 1100s, he says, one way to understand mystically the widow is that we were all wed to the enemy of our souls when we fell. And so we've died to that person, and we're no longer, he's no longer our spouse, and we've turned back to God. Metanoia is repentance, metamorphosis of your perception. You came back like the prodigal son and said, I've sinned against heaven, against you, God. I've gone and I was dissipating my whole life, running after building up this acorn, and I'm so sorry. And so she's a widow in that way. And a widow in those days had no one to take care of them, right? But she entrusted herself to God. And so mystically, that's what we're doing when we say, let me abide in you. Let me come back, Lord. You are the vine. I am the branches. Show me how to remain in your love. Show me how to drop down out of my head into my heart and remain in my love. And like he showed me at the beginning, he's like, what can we do apart from him? And he says, just be mine. Someone in a class that I'm taking, he's not even necessarily calling himself a Christian, but he's saying, be, do, have, be. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? Check, God, how can I have my being in you? What does that mean? What is she talking about? What is Dr. Cheryl Meyer? Whatever this soul, whatever God is wanting to speak through me, God, I give you myself. Take my tears. Take my tears, and that's not nearly all. My friends sang the song Tainted Love last night. It's about, when you run after the false, and you think it's the real, right? Sorry, I don't pray that way. I pray this way, right? That's what that song's about. Anyway, much love to you. I wish you so much love. I hope you get it. I don't mind being like King David and looking like a lunatic for those who don't get it, because it's worth it. You are worth it. You're worth all of these truths. You're worth it. If someone just sings it in one song and you get it through that, I want to know what love is, or bring me a higher love. It could be that it comes through that, or it comes through all this talking that just happened. All right, much love.